At 5:41 in the morning, the flight deck is already alive. Yellow shirts move between parked aircraft. A tow tractor clears the starboard edge. Two Super Hornets sit nose out near the bow. Folded wings locked, fuel lines disconnected, waiting for the next cycle. Deep below them, inside the steel of the carrier, the Combat Information Center is running routine surface and air tracks through the final minutes of dawn. Then one voice cuts through the net. Fast movers, 3 contacts, bearing 038, low altitude, closing. Nobody on the bridge reacts with panic. They react with precision. The officer of the deck turns toward the tactical repeater. 3 symbols have just appeared on the outer edge of the screen. Faint at first, then steady. They are moving fast. Too fast for patrol traffic, too low for routine transit. No identification, no response beacon, no radio call. The carrier holds course for exactly 2 more seconds. Then the order comes, set heightened alert. Track them all the way in. In the Combat Information Center, the Air Warfare Coordinator leans closer to his console as fresh data pours in from the E-2D Hawkeye orbiting farther south over the Gulf. The picture sharpens immediately. 3 aircraft, military profile, tight spacing, descending slightly. Their route is not parallel to the strike group, it is pointed directly at it. A second voice, colder than the first, confirms what everyone already suspects. Possible Iranian fighters. On the flight deck, the change is subtle, but instant. Deck movement tightens. A director snaps one arm overhead and waves maintenance personnel away from exposed lanes. A firefighting team shifts to standby. Ordnance crews stop talking. The roar of jet engines in the distance grows louder, but not from the deck. From the island, the captain steps onto the bridge wing and looks east. Nothing visible yet, just a pale strip of dawn over the Strait of Hormuz and the flat metallic shine of morning light on the water. Behind him, the tactical speaker cracks again, range decreasing. Contacts now at 82 miles, speed high, no comms. The destroyers screening the carrier group have already moved ahead of the moment. Their Aegis arrays are tracking, their intercept geometry is calculating. Every console in the formation is now solving the same problem from a different angle. Nobody says attack, not yet, but the carrier is no longer operating in routine transit mode. It is operating inside a narrowing clock. At 5:43, the Hawkeye pushes a clearer readout. 1 aircraft climbs slightly above the other 2. The formation stretches. The lead pair continue low, cutting through the warm air just above the sea, using surface clutter to complicate the radar picture and shorten warning time. The 3rd aircraft hangs back higher, cleaner, like an eye above the strike. In the Combat Information Center, a watchstander calls it exactly as it looks. Split formation, too low, 1 offset high. This is deliberate. The bridge-to-bridge circuit opens on emergency guard frequency. Unidentified military aircraft approaching United States naval formation in international waters. This is a U.S. Navy warship. State your intentions immediately. Silence. The call is repeated. Still nothing. Only the soft electronic hiss of an open channel and the steady collapse of distance. On the flight deck, a crew chief looks up just as the first shape appears beyond the bow. Small, dark, fast. It is there for barely a second before it vanishes behind heat shimmer and glare. Then the second one flashes into view farther right, lower still, hard over the water. Nobody mistakes what they are now. Iranian fighters. The ship does not lurch. It does not break formation. It does not throw the crew into a frenzy. That is not how an American carrier answers pressure. It answers with control. Secure exposed deck operations comes the order. Standby defensive systems. Vector combat air patrol back in. Far above the carrier, 2 American fighters already airborne begin turning toward the formation. Farther out, a cruiser tightens its radar track and updates weapon solutions it may never need to fire. This is what a strike group is built to do. See first, sort fast, respond without chaos. At 5:44, one of the Iranian fighters drops even lower and accelerates. The motion is unmistakable. Its nose aligns not with the open sea, but with the carrier's forward quarter. In the Combat Information Center, every headset goes quiet for half a heartbeat. Then a warning tone cuts through the compartment. A narrow beam has just swept the formation. Not broad search radar, something tighter, sharper, more focused. The electronic warfare operator turns to his supervisor. We are getting emissions. Another sweep hits. Longer this time. The operator does not raise his voice. Possible track mode. On the bridge, the captain never looks away from the horizon. Keep recording, he says. Do not break posture. Below him, deck crew hold where they are, helmets tilted skyward, listening to the distant growl getting louder by the second. The first jet is now inbound on a line too clean to dismiss. The second is sliding wide to starboard. The third remains back and high, exactly where a controller or spotter would want to be. This is no accidental pass. This is a shaped approach. At 5:45, the lead Iranian fighter cuts across the morning haze and drives straight toward the carrier group at attack speed. It is no longer approaching, it is committing. From the carrier's island, the jet is now visible through the haze as a hard, dark shape skimming just above the waterline. Nose steady, speed increasing. Off its right, slightly wider, the second fighter begins to arc into position. The third remains high and offset, holding enough altitude to watch the whole geometry unfold. 3 aircraft, 3 angles, 1 target. Inside the Combat Information Center, the tactical display updates in rapid, silent bursts. Range, bearing, altitude, closure rate. The numbers are collapsing fast. Lead contact now 46 miles. Second contact offset starboard. Third contact maintaining high cover. Nobody wastes words. Nobody needs to. On the bridge, the captain keeps his posture unchanged, hands flat on the rail, eyes forward. Behind him, the air warfare coordinator's voice comes up over the net. Formation pattern confirms intent. This is not a transit. This is pressure geometry. The carrier strike group responds exactly the way it was built to respond. Ahead of the carrier, one destroyer shifts slightly outward, opening its defensive angle. Another tightens its position aft of the starboard quarter. A Ticonderoga-class cruiser farther back locks all 3 contacts into a cleaner radar picture and pushes refined tracks across the network. Aegis systems are now fully awake across the formation, solving engagement sequences down to fractions of seconds. Vertical launch cells remain closed for now, but every ship in the screen is already prepared to fire. At 5:46, the emergency frequency opens again. Iranian military aircraft approaching United States naval formation. You are closing unsafely. Alter course immediately. The message goes out in English, then again on military guard. No reply, no call sign, no acknowledgement, only silence and speed. On the flight deck, the transition is now complete. Tow vehicles are off the lanes. Exposed crews have been pulled back. Fire teams kneel behind protected positions. Ordnance handlers stand by under the island overhang. Helmets tilted upward, listening to the sound of engines building over the water. Above them, the carrier's island sensors are tracking every movement, every sweep, every second of closure. In the Combat Information Center, the electronic warfare operator stiffens. We have got emissions again. The room narrows around that sentence. The first sweep is brief. The second is stronger. The third stays on just a fraction longer than a search radar should. The operator turns toward his supervisor without taking his eyes off the scope. Lead aircraft is tightening beam width. Possible fire control behavior. That changes the room, not into panic, but into sharper discipline. An officer on the far side of the compartment gives the next order. Mark time, record all emissions, build the profile. Because this is the other side of a confrontation at sea, every aggressive move is also a signature. Every radar sweep, every angle of approach, every moment of hesitation is data. The closer the Iranian aircraft come, the more they reveal. But that matters later. Right now, what matters is distance. Lead contact, 33 miles. The fighter closest to the carrier drops lower still, so low that from the bridge it seems to disappear in the glare between wave tops. The second aircraft widens farther to starboard, positioning itself not behind the first, but slightly displaced, enough to divide visual attention and force the outer escorts to account for 2 potential attack axes at once. High above them, the third fighter turns just enough to stay outside the most dangerous part of the envelope. Watching, relaying, controlling. At 5:47, the first American fighters re-enter the picture. 2 U.S. Navy jets already airborne on Combat Air Patrol Bank hard back toward the strike group, their vector updated mid-turn by the Hawkeye. They are still minutes out, but no longer distant. Their return changes the clock for everyone. The Iranians know it. So does the carrier. One of the destroyers ahead of the formation reports firm weapon solutions on the 2 low contacts. Another confirms track continuity on the high aircraft. Inside the cruiser's Combat Information Center, the Tactical Action Officer reviews possible intercept windows if a missile leaves a rail. Still no launch, still no shot, still the same American discipline. Do not escalate first, but be fully ready to finish it if the other side does. At 5:48, the lead Iranian fighter climbs just slightly, only enough to stabilize its line, and then noses back down toward the carrier's forward quarter. That tiny adjustment tells the whole story. It is not maneuvering randomly, it is setting up. On the bridge, one watch officer says what everyone is now thinking. He is lining up for a run. The second fighter responds immediately, tightening its own arc on the starboard side. Not close enough to strike yet, but close enough to force the escorts to divide their attention. The high aircraft keeps station above and behind, exactly where a controller would want to remain when coordinating timing. This is no longer intimidation by presence alone. This is an attack profile. The emergency frequency opens one final time. Iranian military aircraft, alter course now. You are entering an unsafe and escalatory posture toward United States naval forces. Nothing, no answer, only the lead fighter dropping into a cleaner line. Faster now, nose fixed, altitude razor low. Heading locked toward the carrier group as if the entire sky has narrowed to a single point. Inside the Combat Information Center, the radar picture tightens. The electronic warfare board lights again. Then a new call cuts across the compartment. Possible targeting radar. Lead aircraft committing. At 5:48, the distance has collapsed. The formation is set, and every ship in the strike group knows the same thing at once. This is no longer an intercept. It is an attack profile. At 5:49, the first shot comes without a word. Inside the Combat Information Center, the warning does not sound like panic. It sounds like confirmation. Spike, spike. Lead contact has gone hard track. A beat later, another voice cuts across the compartment. Possible release. Nobody asks what that means. Everybody knows. The lead Iranian fighter has stopped posturing. It is no longer shaping pressure. It is executing. Low over the water, nose fixed on the carrier group's forward quarter. It holds its line just long enough to complete the run. Then, for a fraction of a second, its profile changes. Small, almost invisible, unless you are already looking for it. The weapon leaves the rail, missile away, inbound fast mover from lead aircraft. The call hits every circuit in the strike group at once, and the entire formation moves before the words are finished. Ahead of the carrier, the nearest destroyer does not hesitate. Its Aegis system has already solved the intercept. Hatches open. A missile punches vertically into the dawn and rolls hard toward the threat, its motor burning white against the pale sky. Farther aft, the cruiser's radar locks tighter, refining track quality on both the inbound weapon and the two remaining Iranian fighters. The carrier itself does not break into chaos. It tightens. Flight deck crews flatten behind protected positions. Fire teams brace low. The officer of the deck holds course for one more measured second before a controlled heading change begins. Small, deliberate, just enough to complicate the inbound geometry without throwing the formation into disorder. That is the difference between panic and training. One loses structure, the other preserves it under fire. Electronic warfare kicks across the strike group like a second nervous system. Jamming floods outward. Decoys arm. Countermeasure teams stand by for the next order. On the destroyers, close-in defense crews track the inbound line with the cold focus of repetition. Every screen now shows the same problem. One weapon, sea skimming, fast and closing. Above the formation, the two American fighters returning on combat air patrol receive immediate authority to commit. They do not dive toward the missile. They go for the shooters. The first U.S. jet angles toward the lead Iranian aircraft from high port quarter. The second turns wide to cut off the starboard fighter that has been shadowing the run from the side. The third Iranian aircraft, still high and offset, now has to decide whether to stay in control position or brake to survive. That decision is already late. Back at sea level, the first intercept is seconds away. Destroyer engaging. No one on the bridge sees the actual impact clearly. It happens too fast and too low. 1 second, there's a hard white line racing over the water. The next, there is a bright rupture just above the surface. A violent bloom of flame and debris followed by spray lifting into the morning air, like a wall of shattered glass. Splash one. Splash one. First inbound destroyed. No cheering, not yet, because almost immediately another problem appears. The second Iranian fighter has tightened its angle on the starboard side, forcing the escorts to account for a possible follow-up attack. For one brief, dangerous moment, the strike group has to fight two clocks at once. The debris field of the first intercept falling toward the sea and the possibility that the second shooter is now inside release parameters. The electronic warfare board lights again. Additional emissions from starboard fighter. That gets everyone's attention. The destroyer off the carrier's starboard quarter slews its sensors and opens a new track solution. The cruiser behind the formation adds another layer. The Hawkeye above it all keeps feeding the picture clean and continuous, tying fighters, ships, radar, and intent into one moving map. This is what the Iranians came to break, and this is exactly what they failed to break. At 5:50, the second fighter dips, but not cleanly. Its line is unstable. The first American combat air patrol jet is already descending into its 6 o'clock. Close enough to threaten, far enough to hold discipline. No missile leaves the rail. No warning shot is fired. The U.S. pilot does not need theatrics. Position is enough. Speed is enough. The message is enough. You got one shot. You do not get another. The starboard Iranian fighter breaks its line hard. It rolls away from the carrier group and drags low across the edge of the formation, trying to exit without showing too much retreat. The high aircraft reacts a second later, finally losing the detached posture it had held since the first approach. It banks left, shedding altitude, no longer controlling the geometry, but trying to escape it. Only the lead fighter, the one that fired, holds straight for a moment longer. And that moment tells the entire story. It is no longer attacking, it is running. The first American fighter stays locked behind it, closing the angle, but not crossing the line. Every escort in the strike group maintains weapons quality track on all 3 aircraft. If any one of them turns back in, the answer will be immediate. At 5:50 and 41 seconds, the last fragments of the destroyed missile slap into the sea astern of the formation. The carrier is still moving. Its deck is marked only by tension, not impact. Its escorts are still in formation. Its fighters are now above the threat instead of racing toward it. And the men who launched the attack have just lost the only advantage they had. Inside the Combat Information Center, the Air Warfare Coordinator looks at the board, then says it flat. Iran fired first. Attack failed. All units maintain pressure. Out over the Strait of Hormuz, the geometry has changed completely. The carrier group is no longer bracing for a strike. It is turning the trap around. At 5:51, the attack is over. The danger is not. Out over the strait, the 3 Iranian fighters are still airborne, still armed, and still inside a battle space they no longer control. Less than 2 minutes earlier, they had come in fast, low, and coordinated, trying to compress the carrier group into a defensive crouch. Now the geometry has flipped. The U.S. Navy is no longer reacting to their timing. The Iranians are reacting to American position. Inside the Combat Information Center, the tactical screen has changed shape completely. The inbound missile track is gone, burned out over the water. In its place are 3 air contacts moving away from their original attack lanes, each on a slightly different vector. Each forced off the clean lines they had used on the way in. 1 high, 2 low, none stable. Lead shooter accelerating east, starboard fighter breaking south, high cover descending. Looks like they are trying to reform. The Air Warfare Coordinator does not look up. Do not let them reform. That order moves across the strike group like current through steel. Above the carrier, the 2 American combat air patrol fighters now own the sky the Iranians tried to use. The first U.S. jet stays on the lead shooter's rear quarter, high enough to threaten, far enough to preserve control. The second slides wide and down, sealing off the fighter that broke south after losing its attack line. Neither American pilot rushes the intercept. Neither needs to. The point is no longer to chase. The point is to box them in. At sea level, the escorts hold the lower half of the trap. A destroyer ahead of the carrier maintains firm radar track on all 3 aircraft. Another on the starboard quarter adjusts only slightly, enough to widen its defensive umbrella and deny any quick turn back toward the formation. The cruiser astern remains cold and methodical, feeding a continuous engagement quality picture into the network. No gaps, no confusion, no second chance. At 5:52, the lead Iranian fighter makes its first real mistake after the launch. Instead of continuing a clean exit, it pulls hard left, trying to shake the American jet riding its rear quarter and angle back toward the center of the formation's outer screen. It is a move made under pressure, too sharp, too visible, and exactly what the US Navy wants. The American pilot does not bite on speed. He bites on position. He holds high, cuts the angle, and forces the Iranian fighter lower, closer to the layer where ship radars track best and escape corridors shrink fastest. The move is clean, quiet, professional. No radio dramatics, no warning burst, just a controlled squeeze of airspace until the Iranian aircraft has only 2 options left: extend away or fall deeper into the envelope. It chooses away, lead contact aborting turn, extending east. On the second track, the southern fighter tries a different answer. It dumps altitude, rides low across the heat shimmer above the sea, and throws out a short burst of flares. Not because a missile is chasing it, but because the pilot is feeling the pressure and wants to break rhythm. Break lock logic. Break something. It changes nothing. The second American fighter holds outside the flare bloom, matches the break, and keeps the Iranian jet pinned away from the carrier group's starboard side. Below them, the destroyer tracking that sector never loses contact. This is what the Iranians failed to account for. A US aircraft carrier is not one ship. It is a moving grid of sensors, fighters, radars, and command nodes that overlap until there is nowhere useful to hide. At 5:53, the third Iranian fighter, the one that had stayed high and back through most of the attack run, finally loses its detached posture. It drops altitude and banks toward the other 2, clearly trying to pull the formation back together for a controlled exit. But the moment it descends, it gives away the one thing it had preserved: separation. The Hawkeye updates first, then the cruiser, then both American fighters get the same revised picture. The high cover is no longer high cover. It is just a third exposed aircraft moving into a sky already owned by someone else. Third contact, now vulnerable. The words are simple. The effect is not. One American jet shifts just enough to show presence on the descending fighter's flank. Not an attack, not a dive, just enough closure and angle to make the message unmistakable. You are done here. The Iranian pilot reacts instantly. Nose comes up, bank reverses, altitude returns. The rejoin attempt collapses before it is fully formed. Inside the Combat Information Center, the result is obvious before anyone says it out loud. The 3 fighters are no longer a strike package. They are 3 separate aircraft trying to leave the same bad decision by different routes. At 5:54, the strike group tightens pressure one last notch. No missiles fired, no dogfight, no dramatic roll into open combat. Just American fighters overhead, destroyers below, the cruiser behind, the Hawkeye above them all, and nowhere for the Iranians to rebuild the attack they came in with. The lead shooter continues east. The southern fighter drifts farther off the carrier's line. The third aircraft stays high, hesitant for 1 second too long, then finally turns with the others. That hesitation says everything. They came in hunting a carrier. Now they are leaving in pieces, and in the center of it all, the carrier keeps moving, unbroken, still generating combat power, while the sky above Hormuz belongs to the US Navy again. At 5:55, the sky over the strait is no longer contested, it is controlled. Not because the Iranian fighters have been destroyed, not because the carrier group fired everything it had, not because the sea is littered with wreckage. None of that happened. What happened was worse for the attackers. They failed. Out ahead of the formation, the lead Iranian fighter continues east at high speed, no longer shaping an attack lane, no longer holding a clean line, no longer part of a coordinated strike package. The second aircraft remains low and wide to the south, separated by distance and pressure. The third stays high for a few seconds longer, then turns with the others, abandoning the last trace of the geometry they had brought in with them. Inside the Combat Information Center, the tactical display tells the whole story in clean symbols. 3 hostile contacts, all moving away, all tracked, none in position to re-engage. The Air Warfare Coordinator studies the board for 1 more second, then gives the order the entire strike group has been waiting for. Maintain track, hold the screen, prepare to resume flight operations. That is the moment the balance becomes unmistakable. The carrier was attacked. The carrier is still launching. At 5:56, the 2 American fighters overhead do not chase recklessly. They shadow. One stays high on the lead shooter's rear quarter, preserving pressure without crossing the line into a kill sequence. The second continues to own the southern lane, making absolutely certain no Iranian pilot gets the idea to swing back for one last, desperate run. The Hawkeye orbit remains steady, feeding a continuous picture to every ship in the formation. Below them, destroyers and cruiser keep full radar-quality track. Every bearing change logged, every turn stored, every emission captured. This is not revenge. This is dominance through control. On the flight deck, the shift is just as telling. Crew chiefs move first, then handlers, then yellow shirts. The pause that began when the missile left the rail is over. Catapult crews return to stations. A tow tractor rolls again. A director snaps both arms outward, guiding a waiting jet into line with calm, practiced precision. Fire teams remain in place, but the posture has changed. The deck is no longer braced for impact. It is regenerating combat power. That image matters more than any explosion, because this was the whole point of the attack. The Iranian fighters did not come in just to fire a missile. They came to interrupt the carrier's rhythm, to freeze the deck, to force confusion, to prove that even an American flat top in Hormuz could be shoved off balance. They failed at every level. At 5:57, the first launch crew reports ready. The bridge stays quiet. The captain does not make a speech. He does not need to. He watches the horizon, where the Iranian fighters are now shrinking into the distance, and gives a short nod toward the flight deck status repeater. Resume cycle. That order lands with more weight than any threat broadcast over the radio. Moments later, steam hisses. A U.S. Navy fighter surges down the catapult track and slams into the morning sky. Then another. Not in retreat, not in panic, not as an emergency scramble. As part of a restored launch rhythm, that is the answer. 3 Iranian fighter jets attacked a U.S. aircraft carrier in the Strait of Hormuz. Minutes later, the carrier was still generating sorties. Inside the Combat Information Center, the aftermath is already being built into data. Electronic warfare teams replay radar sweeps from the Iranian approach. The timing of fire control behavior is isolated. The missile release point is marked. The split formation profile is saved. Communications officers note the absence of warning calls, the silence on guard frequency, the precise second when the attack shifted from intimidation to release. Intelligence specialists will study all of it, how the Iranians approached, how they spaced, how they coordinated, where they hesitated, when they broke. That is the second defeat. The first was tactical. The second is permanent. Every aggressive move they made is now part of an American library. At 5:58, the lead combat air patrol fighter reports the Iranian aircraft continuing outbound. No reversal, no attempt to regroup, no second run. The southern contact remains separated. The high aircraft is now just another retreating symbol on a screen full of American certainty. The strike group never lost formation. The carrier never lost the deck. The escorts never lost the picture. and the men who came in expecting shock achieved only exposure. Out on the bridge wing, the morning finally looks like morning again. Sunlight cuts across the water. Wake trails settle into long white lines behind the ships. The strait is still narrow, still dangerous, still one of the most volatile waterways on the planet. But for these 8 minutes, the question of who controlled it was answered clearly, not by rhetoric, by performance. No grand victory announcement follows, just procedure. Logs updated, tracks maintained, combat air patrol adjusted, deck cycle restored. This is how the US Navy closes a fight when it refuses to be rattled. Not with noise, but with continuation. And that may be the part that hits hardest. The Iranian pilots came in thinking they were about to change the day. They did, just not in their favor. So here is the question. Should the United States respond even harder when a carrier is directly attacked? Or is this exactly why American naval discipline is so difficult to break? Drop your answer in the comments. Because that morning over Hormuz, 3 Iranian fighter jets attacked a US aircraft carrier. Then the carrier kept launching aircraft, and Iran was the one falling back.